switch up the tone. We've got a lot of very masculine-oriented type of presentations this morning. We're going to talk about a very female kind of thing now. I don't know if that one. Yes. So I'm going to talk about something that happened to me, and that actually I was very ashamed of for many years. And the way I decided to deal with it ultimately was to confront it. The only way to get rid of shame is to talk about it and to confront it. And the more that we do that, the more we can take stigma off things that happen to us. 10 years ago, now it's happening to me.
Point to the back, point to the back.
Point to the back? Oh.
Uh-oh.
There.
Back, then we're going to get it forward again.
No, the down button on the...
Oh, down. There we go. Oh, now I'm done. 10 years ago, I was a reporter at a top newspaper in the United States, the Miami Herald. I had bought a 3-bedroom house. I had been an in-demand foreign correspondent in Latin America. I spoke Spanish and French. I traveled the world. And I built an accomplished life as a career woman. Here I am with Jeff Bridges. And then I was also the proud mother of a young son. One day I was working in the newsroom in Miami early one morning, and I got a call from a man named James who said he had a story about the mob in South Florida. So this sounded pretty interesting to me, so I went to go meet him and to discuss the story idea. And in the middle of our conversation, he abruptly asked me out to dinner. Now, I've interviewed hundreds, probably several hundred people. That had never happened to me, and it still has never happened to me to this day. It was like something out of a movie. And so I was taken aback, and I said, no, I turned him down. I said, you're a potential source. I couldn't do that. And so the conversation went on. But I also wasn't sure that I even liked this guy. He was a New Yorker. He was loud, brash. But there was sort of a genuine quality about him. He had this sort of rough charm. And plus, I'd been divorced for 6 years, and my dating skills were rusty, to say the least. My editors decided we weren't going to pursue this story idea. It would take too much time and manpower. But over the next 6 months, James kept calling me from Los Angeles, where he lived, and we would have these long personal conversations on my cell phone. So after I hung up after one of these long personal conversations one day, I realized I did like him. It was refreshing to listen to a man revealing his feelings and his fears and his doubts. And I have to admit, he was genuinely interested in me. His attention was flattering. It was very seductive. So the next time he came out to Miami, I accepted that dinner invitation. So that first night, that first date was magical. We sat at an outdoor table at a Bayfront restaurant in Miami. The sunset was fading into a palette of oranges and pinks behind my back. There was a balmy breeze blowing. Yachts were clinking gently against the moorings. Again, like a movie. And as I sipped a glass of wine, James leaned his head on his arm and said, "Christina, tell me everything about you." And a warm glow spread inside me. And as night dropped around us, I talked and talked about my adventurous career, about my childhood. It was something I'd rarely done. As a kid, I was always the misfit because my family moved around the world, and I actually grew up in 7 countries. I'd learned that talking about myself actually made me more of a misfit, so I didn't. I'd also learned to navigate the world in context to my verbally abusive alcoholic father. If I stayed quiet, I'd avoid being the target of his put-downs and his sarcasm. The result was that at age 43, when I met James, I was starved for attention, but I didn't really know it at that point. "Christina," James said when I finished, "you are the most interesting person I have ever met." I slipped right into his smile like a long drink of water. But if I was hooked, so was he. He would jump on a plane on a whim and fly across the country to spend the weekend with me. He'd call me at all hours of the day or night just to hear my voice. He pampered me at a luxury spa one weekend. He praised my writing to the hilt. No one sees you like I do, Christina. And the thing was, I truly felt that was true. He would say, I see the real you. I literally thought he was an angel sent to me from heaven. And I told him so. And he told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. A month or two into the relationship, however, I started noticing some odd behaviors. He would cut in lines in the store or something, getting people mad and embarrassing me. He would steal the cookies out of my 10-year-old son's lunchbox. And when I asked him about this stuff, he'd shrug it off and laugh it off and say, oh, don't you think you have quirks too, Christina? One night, we were at a casino with a group of his friends, and I was talking to a guy in the group when James barked out a command to fetch him a glass of water. I was pretty annoyed at the interruption, the tone, so I didn't immediately stop my conversation. The next thing I knew, James stormed off in a fury. He returned an hour later, calling me names in front of everyone. I wanted to leave, but I was stuck because he had driven. So on the way home, he pulled over on the side of the road and apologized profusely. I wasn't about to accept his apology, but he refused to drive on unless I did. So I had to. Everything ran smoothly for a while, then more odd things started to happen. He confessed one day to hunting through my email trash on my computer. He blocked my neighbor at the front door so she couldn't come in and see me. When I confronted him about these incidents, he always had an excuse. He was protecting me. People were jealous of me. It was like I was making a big deal over nothing. It was bizarre, but I brushed off my doubts. His attention had become the drug that made me feel worthy, that made me feel validated. So after a few months, he suggested I move to Los Angeles. Now, I wasn't keen to uproot my very comfortable life in Miami, so he ramped up the pressure and started to lecture me every chance he got. Miami was a backwater. You'll never do anything out there, Christina. You're getting old. Opportunities are going to dry up. You've got to come to LA. Just come and check it out. So I said, okay. So I flew out to LA to check it out. One night, after a night on the town, we stopped for gas, and when he returned from paying, it was like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde transformation. He was now in a terrifying rage for what I had no idea. He accused me of doing preposterous things with men, calling me more names. When we arrived at his apartment, I immediately packed my bag. My plan was to call a taxi, get to the airport, and just take a flight anywhere just to get out of Los Angeles. He grabbed my wrist and threw me. Luckily, I fell against the bed. I got up very warily, shocked and scared, and I was eyeing his hands, which he had balled to his fists, into fists at the side of his body. But he immediately apologized. He confessed he was bad at relationships. He didn't want to lose me. He was just insecure. He kept on and on and on until I caved. Because at that point, the good still outweighed the bad. I ended up quitting my job, selling my house, and moving myself and my son across the country. Now, once I got far from family and friends, his erratic behavior escalated. He left me stranded one day at the beach. He accused me of having sex with random men like the plumber or the waiter, the guy in the park. He checked up wherever I was going. He hovered over me every time I was on the phone or writing emails on the computer. Now, my son hated James for ordering me around and dominating me. Fortunately, James mostly ignored him. I felt trapped, but I was on a petrifying roller coaster ride that would never stop. I knew something was drastically wrong with James, and in moments of clarity, he admitted it. But more than once, he promised to go through therapy, but he never did. So by now, you're wondering, hey, this woman looks pretty smart, sounds pretty good. When is she going to come to her senses? The final breaking point came when my son came to me and revealed that James had given him money to spy on me. No way was I going to stand by and let James do to my son what he had done to me, manipulate me. It was like a bucket of ice dumped on my head. So after James went out one morning, I called the movers and I left. It was a very long road back to myself after that. I felt like Humpty Dumpty. I had fallen off the wall and lay shattered in pieces on the ground. One piece of me would erupt in crying jags over and I'd have to pull in, over on the highway to drive on or run into the bathroom at work. Another piece was overwhelming shame and humiliation. What had I done to my life and my son's? After a few months, the hurt began to subside, and I felt ready to reinvent my life and my friends. So one day, I invited a casual acquaintance to lunch, and after much hesitation, I shared with her what I'd been through in an effort to be more personal. She stared at me and she said, "So what does that say about you, Christina?" My face boiled. I was so embarrassed. She saw my shock and backpedaled a little bit. But later, as I walked to my car and I thought about what her words echoed in my head. And I said, well, what did this relationship say about me? I realized I had to take a hard look in the mirror. Why had I ignored the early red flags? Why had I given a year and a half of myself to someone who plainly didn't deserve it? I was desperate to make sense of something that seemingly had no sense. So my first stop was a therapist. She told me right away that I'd been a victim of domestic violence. Domestic violence? Moi? In my mind, that only happened to women in housing projects and trailer parks. But I researched it, and I found that intimate partner violence is incredibly common. It happens to 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men. I also found that it cuts across all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic lines. It wasn't just physical abuse either. It was verbal abuse, emotional abuse. It had happened to me, and it was a really humbling realization. I remembered that my sister had gone to a self-help group, Al-Anon, which you may have heard of, so I figured I'd try that. And then Al-Anon was full of people like me who had tried to control the lives of others and neglected their own. I was often invited to speak at meetings, and I started to find that telling my story shored up my badly eroded self-confidence and self-esteem. However, it wasn't until someone suggested I go to a domestic violence support group that I found my home. There, I didn't have to explain myself. There was no judgment, no questions. As women of all ages, nationalities, educational levels, social classes shared their experiences, I recognized they were them, they were me, and I was them. Perhaps the most cathartic activity of all was something I've been doing my whole life, and that was writing. Writing helped me put order to the chaos that my life had devolved into, and it helped me sort through all the guilt and shame. I had poems and short stories published in literary reviews, and then I felt driven to use my experience so young teenage girls could recognize the signs of an abuser as they start their dating lives. If I had known those signs, then maybe I could have avoided this catastrophe. So I wrote a young adult novel called Girl on the Brink, and I'm proud to say it was named to the 2016 Best of YA list by Suspense Magazine. So looking back, while I would never want to repeat this relationship, in a strange way, I'm really grateful for it. I learned that painful experiences are opportunities for growth. And when we find the courage to go deep inside ourselves and find that hurt inner child, we can heal that wound, and we can learn to love ourselves and find compassion for ourselves. When we achieve that sense of self-worth from within, it's really only then that we are truly successful. And I'll close with a quote from Marilyn Monroe: "Sometimes good things fall apart, so better things can fall together." Thank you.